Hi, welcome back to another episode of Art World Confessions. So, today I wanted to talk about a book that I read many years ago, and it's called Touched with Fire. You can look online for that book and see what it's about. If you're in the creative fields, it's really a good book to read. So, Kay Redfield Jameson, she wrote about manic depressive illness and the artistic temperament. Now, if you look at someone like Caravaggio, he might even be in the book. I can't remember. I read it a while ago. But she goes through art history and she goes through many different fields, not just the artistic fields, but science, math, many different fields where really strong, iconic, smart, um, game changing people had this illness. So I'm not going to mention everyone who's in her book. You can just read the book to see who is in there besides Caravaggio. But in my own experience in the art world, I have come across quite a few people who I'm going to speak about right now in the context of no one cares. Again, no one in the West seems to care about anything except themselves. So a few years ago, I knew a South African artist who had, I won't mention any names, but he had been a huge curator and an artist. He was represented by galleries in South Africa. He was represented by a gallery in France and one in London and one in New York. And some of these galleries had the same owner. Again, I'm not going to mention any names because I just don't want to have to deal with any blowback. But basically, this guy came to New York after many years, and he was in his early 40s, I think, at that time, late 30s, early 40s. And you could tell that he was operating on a high level of energy. Let's just call it high level of energy. Eventually, he was burning down everything in New York City, relationships with people. He was burning down restaurant bills and just all these fantastic ideas he had. And he was drawing in a lot of really high level people, people with money who could help him to realize his dreams. And then after a while, everything simply collapsed. And when it collapsed, of course, no one was around him. No one was around, anyways, to sort of help him, although I'm not sure if people can be helped at this stage of mania that he was operating at. But neither his gallerists, neither his friends or family were around to not only witness, but to help guide him back to some integration in society. And by that, I mean anchoring him on this plane, on this physical dimension, because God knows he was really up there. And eventually, he stabilized. I won't go into how, but his parents brought him back home and whatever medication they had to give him, because a lot of the times this is a genetic illness that is passed down. And, it's a spectrum and it could be mixed with any other number of disorders. And recently I came upon it again in the creative field, I will just say that, and this time with a woman. And I started working with her primarily for art. And as I got to know her better, I realized what I was dealing with and sadly what was happening to her. And all I can say is, again, I can see that no one is there for her. No one. Neither her family, neither her friends, not the art community, not the spiritual or ethnic community that she identifies heavily with. No one is there. They're there to take advantage of her. They are there to somehow um, make life less easy for her, I would say, because definitely, oof, there's lots of bugs around here. I don't think they're necessarily ill intentioned, but I can see that no one has any idea how to make life better for her without some sort of drastic measures like institutionalization and basically absconding with her assets, which many people seem to have done already. And no one really offering any real solutions. I could probably offer some solutions, but I don't feel it's my place. I'm not a member of the family. I was just brought in by her to help her with some art stuff. And I'm trying to do that within the context of all the constraints. But as a community, as an art community, I reached out to a couple people who knew her for years and in a professional context. And I've seen how the family interact with her over the last few weeks. And again, it's just somehow predatory. It's not in any way supportive and helpful to her. I mentioned in past episodes the artist Camille Claudel, and it's more than 100 years since that time, and people still don't know in the creative field what they're looking at when they see something like this in a person. They don't know how to deal with it compassionately. They don't know how to talk about it among themselves. I think for some people it is quite scary to see people in certain states like this. Um, of course, you could just use the pejorative term, they're quote unquote crazy, and there's no space in Western society for that. In indigenous societies, in societies that are much more earth conscious, that are tied to spirituality and the connection between all realms, they don't just discount this as crazy and then just put them in an asylum like they did with Camille Claudel. They understand that certain messages are transmitted through people in these higher states of consciousness, and they are valued in their community. They are cared for in their community. And that sort of energy is channeled not just into creative stuff, but as the book Touched with Fire shows, into many other areas of life. And they can definitely help us to jump to another level of consciousness if we are open to it, if we don't just shut it down, medicate it, or imprison it, which I'm sure, in living in big cities, you see people being picked up all the time by police or by the hospitals or whatever. The West doesn't know how to deal with this. If it's not making money for them, if it's not enriching them in some way, if it's not entertaining them, because many people also, they're happy to invite these people over because they're entertaining up to a point. If they get troublesome, then of course you're thrown out of the party. Um, Again, this is something that should be taken seriously because it could end in harm for the person who is suffering with this stuff. And I say suffering because part of it is suffering. You see the people suffering, and they're not really sure how to handle it themselves outside of whatever medication people have administered to them in the past. So I don't know. This is a bit of a heavy episode, but I think it's really important in the artistic community to be aware of this and to help people who have this sort of predisposition, I would say. And it's important for people, not just in the artistic community, but for her, she's in a, let's call it, religious community. I won't go much further than that. And they, instead of taking advantage of her, should be really trying to help her. And I don't see people really doing that, and it's very, very sad. Again, no one cares. Thanks for being here. Thanks for liking, sharing, subscribing, and hitting the bell notification so you know when I upload a new episode of Art World Confessions. Have a great summer.